Welcome to Stream, a truck, tractor, trailer.com production. My name is Zach Miller. I'm your host, and I'm really excited about this. You longtime viewers, listeners know that among the many problems that we discuss on this show, at the forefront of them is, of course, the issue of truck parking. This is a nationwide problem, and I'm so excited to be joined today by Mike Landau, who is the CEO of ParkMyFleet.com. Mike, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
It's great to be here, Zach, and thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I mean, this is, you guys, a lot of us in the industry are trying to solve this problem, to work on this problem. And you guys, your company, you're there, boots on the ground, actually going about doing it. So I guess if you could just give us the history of the company and sort of, where you sit today in terms of solving this truck parking crisis that we have in this nation.
Sure. So you're certainly correct in the fact that it's a problem, and I would say it's probably reached crisis level in many different metropolitan areas. Mm-hmm. Truckers, especially owner-operators, are faced with zero option to be able to park their rigs, either overnight or long-term. And then as you get into fleet-level discussions, there's certainly fleets that do not have a home, and we're seeing that, in large companies, small companies, medium-sized companies, a lack of physical locations to place vehicles as you get into the densely populated metropolitan areas is certainly a problem. So we were born kind of in the teeth of COVID. My background's in real estate and fintech. We started noticing some anomalies at the height of the pandemic, particularly in how vehicles and goods were moving, and had some initial success actually in the rental car realm, where they were faced with massive infleeting, and then vehicles that were up for remarketing coming off lease were also faced with the problem where dealerships just simply didn't have room for them because vehicles weren't selling during the pandemic. And then what it really opened our eyes up to was the fact that parking at scale, the services to manage fleets at scale on a national level, and then the new fuels like EV and hydrogen fuel cell were going to be an issue, not just in a rental car vertical or in the trucking vertical, but pretty much in every major mobility vertical that exists where you're moving goods or people. And that's really where we were kind of born out of. And then from there, we've quickly scaled. So we're live in about 36 cities in the United States now, and continuing to grow, hoping to hit about 50 by the end of 22.
That's incredible. That really is incredible. And it's interesting that you guys really got started and ramped up during the pandemic, because that's also when I think a lot of the legislators started to notice the problem as well. I know that both at the federal level, there's a lot more discussion about truck parking than I personally have seen, in my time in the industry. And here on the local New York City level, you and I are both based in New York City. Pretty much any conversation I have, or that some of the pamphlets I see given out by the local representatives, is about truck parking. And it's always been a problem. I don't want someone who's listening to say, oh, well, truck parking in New York City, it's not a new problem. It's like, no. It's not a new problem. I understand that. But there's a level of understanding about it now that we haven't quite seen before the pandemic. And so that's what I think is interesting.
Sure. And to that point, on the federal level, the DOT is certainly taking a look at this. There's other government agencies that are taking a hard look at it as well. The DOE, by example, under Secretary Granholm's leadership, has started to really take a hard look at how are you going to get the required infrastructure to handle the EV transition, the hydrogen transition. So there's a lot of government agencies on the federal level, as well as there was a bipartisan infrastructure bill that was passed that doesn't directly address parking, but it certainly addresses the infrastructure that's going to be needed as we move away from ICE vehicles. Now, on the local level in New York City, yes, it's not a new problem at all. And I think it's really going to take public-private partnerships to try to solve it. the government doesn't have, much to the chagrin of, both the elected officials and the industry themselves. It's not like New York City sitting on an abundance of real estate where they could say, hey, we can allocate 25 acres to you. It simply doesn't exist. So, when we talk about public and private partnerships, it's going to take private sector investment as well as public sector involvement from a zoning perspective, by example, to try to alleviate this problem. And, I think that it's going to, looking at how maybe we do things a little differently in bridging mid-mile, last mile, and all the traffic around distribution centers and things of that nature, smart traffic routing, and other things can be a part of the solution. And I'm not espousing to say that I'm the complete solution. There's a shortage that requires, acres and acres of real estate, millions and millions of square feet across the nation to be able to adequately address the issue. But I do think, and we as a company have begun to make inroads in there, that you can, if we're smart about it, and we leverage technologies and, like I said, private-public partnerships to try to, get this to a point where it isn't such a problem.